Well, it looks like I'm up and running. Probably can't see me too well. It's bright out here, and today is September 11th, 2022. It's been 20 years since that false flag, that real event, but that situation occurred to us that basically changed the course of liberty and turned it into the course of slavery. That's not to make light of all those who lost their lives or who were injured from that terrible event, but of course, I've got to be careful with my words here. But we know from all the evidence that's coming out, Shepherd Ambulance has been continuing to work on this, along with the Las Vegas Harvest Festival massacre back in 2017. He's been giving a lot of information about those two events, and there are others, of course, which I won't mention here, different engineers and people for the truth of what happened on that day back in 9/11 in 2001. I didn't really realize what had happened totally until I actually got overseas after I was deployed, and I was with some ordnance people and special forces, and they were whispering amongst each other as we were watching the news. And I asked them, I said, "What's going on, guys?" Most of them were officers. There were a few NCOs there. And they said, "Hey, Colonel, those things didn't come down because those planes hit them. There were explosives inside those buildings. We can see the action of it." And of course, there was a U.S. Air Force Colonel, Ordnance Colonel, maybe he was a general actually, who actually said the same thing. But of course, all those that know what they're talking about were shut up, just like they were about the recent medical situation, right? All those who really had no skin in the corruption, didn't want to do that, were put aside, and the moneyed interests and the interest to enslave the people got all the attention and credit. So at any rate, as you can see, I tried to pick about. Actually, I got the idea of this video as I was walking around here, driving by, and I saw this pile of rubble behind me, and I thought, that'll send a pretty good message about what this video is going to be about. So I know it's Sunday morning. A lot of you are probably in church, but I think this is necessary. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to say is I want to thank Representative Congressman Louis Gohmert from Texas for standing up for Dr. Simone Gold. That entire injustice that was perpetrated on her and so many others in the name of security, which is nothing more than the security of the corrupt and the criminals in government. He has stood up against that problem along with Representative Thomas Massey and some others. But I wanted to recognize him for being out there with Dr. Gold when she was finally released. And this should never, ever have happened in the United States of America. I don't care what the situations were. There have been groups of people who have gone in and done lots worse than what happened on that day, including actual destruction of the area. I mean, compared to what happened then, this was minor. And there's a lot of evidence, of course, as most of you know, that there were groups not aligned with Trump that actually did the damage there that day. Again, I'm not for Trump. I actually dislike him intensely because I think he's deceiving a lot of people. We've caught him in too many problems throughout his career, but even as president and afterwards. So no, I'm not saying that because I feel like he is justified or decent in any way. He's not. Is he better than the alternative that's in the office now? Nah, just different. Just different. He got us in different ways, made the conservatives and the Christians swallow a bunch of lies and deceptions because he was doing it. And that was the whole purpose, I think, behind him getting into office, actually. All right, so I wanted to say that again. Thank you, Representative Gohmert, for standing up for Dr. Simone Gold, who was totally innocent of all those things. When you're invited into a place, there are no trespassing laws, okay, that apply. When you're invited in by those who have control over it, you're not trespassing. I mean, the government can do that when they come up to you and they want to come into your house and you say, no, I just had a friend happen with this the other day. Government comes up, wants in the house. She says, no, not without a warrant. But if she had invited them in, then game's on, right? Whatever comes from that is all right. So when you are invited in, you're not a trespasser. So the government has been corrupt and criminal in its application of what happened on that day. And of course, we all know that there are a bunch of people that should be charged, in fact, that haven't been because they were FBI government informants or assets in one way or another. I don't have a whole lot of time on, hold on a second. I don't have a whole lot of time on the battery when I'm out here like this. It really sucks it down. As most of you know, it seems like I get cut off. The battery gets shut down. So I've tried to give myself a little extra power here with a solar cell, but we'll see what happens. Okay, to the information at hand. As you can see from the title, what I say is that the likes of Biden and Jean-Pierre are the formula for destruction. And that's not an accident, that's on purpose. And we've been carefully led down this path for a number of decades. Most of you know my history, and I'm not here to justify what I did, although I could. But that's not what I'm here for. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, just Google me, you'll probably find out. But I will say I approached it from the point of view of, despite what some Christians would say and others, from the point of view of morality and from the point of view of non-deception and from the point of view of fruit, that you have righteous connections and that you have children from those connections. Not necessarily have to have that, but that was definitely the situation, and I think my history proves that. I'm definitely a committed heterosexual. There's no question about that. But what I did find out when I was going through that entire thing, and I had run into these problems before, let me see how I can put this. I had run-ins with guys who weren't attracted to women, let's put it that way. And many of them thought that I was a potential convert. As a matter of fact, I was told by many of them that the only difference between me and them was a six-pack of beer. And of course, that's not true. And there's a lot of explanation and justification I can put forward to prove my position on that. But regardless, if they kept it to themselves and didn't bother me or anybody else, especially my kids, I didn't care, okay? I don't think it's good, but you know, my demanding that they not do it isn't going to change them at all. I'm going to put my sunglasses on. Hope you don't mind, okay? All right? But I saw that very early on, and then after I got fired from Murray Police Department for my associations with women, when all of the other people that were doing it, and were doing it by fraud and deception, by and large, and a lot of the officers were concerned that I was going to spill the beans on them in my defense, but I never did that. But they were okay. As a matter of fact, the party I went to last night was with a bunch of those guys, the good guys, from that department and from military associations, and we brought up that entire thing again, and they all knew that the ultimatum that had been given to me was that if I just abandoned the women that I had taken under my wing and had given children to, if I just abandoned them and just called them girlfriends and let them go off into poverty and all of that, and not declare the kids my own, etc., that would have been okay. They actually told me that. So it wasn't what I did that was their problem, because they let everybody else off that was doing it for fraud and deception. The problem was that I did. They wanted to change what was in my mind, the reason why I did it. That's what they were after. So it was an early assault on the First Amendment, the right to freedom of religion, the right to freedom of speech, and all of that, and also violations of other amendments, 4th, 5th, and the 9th and 10th. I can say that, but I only bring that up because I wrote a book in 1986 called An Offender for a Word, and I said in that, because I could see what was happening, that legitimate conjugal relations will be looked down upon and even persecuted in the future, and that this other thing, and you know I can't say it on here, but you'll know what I'm talking about, this Lima Gulf Bravo, you get the idea, would be pushed, because that was in the Marxist agenda. That was in also the secret society agendas that I have been telling you about. I saw their plans from the 1800s about how they would do this, and to destroy the man-woman relationship, to take control of the children, and also to destroy mankind. So I've known about these things for a long time, and all of it's kind of built up over the years. I got involved in investigating some child abuse deals with Senator John DeCamp from Nebraska on the Franklin cover-up. I was involved in that to a small extent, but I did assist, which had ties, when we got into it, ties to suspects in Utah. I won't go any further than that, but there was a lot of that, and people that you wouldn't think were involved in it. All the time while they're putting me down for my associations with women. And again, I pointed out, these things are going to take control of the country. They're going to take control of the world. These evil things with the non-heterosexual, I'll just say it that way, non-heterosexual associations, and also going after the kids. I talked about that. And I said it was going to get worse and worse over time. So in my book in 1986, I showed how these things were creeping in and that those were overlooked, yet they were coming after somebody like me. This was all interesting because Isaiah said, and most of you know that I've talked about this before, Isaiah said that their sin is as Sodom, they hide it not. Not only do they do it behind closed doors, which nobody really cares about, even though it's still a problem, but they will actually force it on society. You can't just tolerate it anymore. You're not only supposed to tolerate it, you're supposed to accept it, and you're supposed to promulgate it. And I said that was going to happen, and here we are. So a lot of other things happened. I could go along with my experiences about how the marriage system of the great patriarchs like Gideon. Well, Gideon wasn't a patriarch, but Abraham. And I know a lot of you Christians and other people don't want to hear this, but look what your alternative is today and where you're going. Would you rather have the righteous connections of the patriarchs like Abraham and like Jacob, even David? And I could name a lot of others that you'd probably go, what? Gideon's an example. But at any rate, would you rather have that or what you're seeing now? And you should know what I'm talking about. These corrupt shows that they put on for the kids in the schools, and they're government sponsored. Now, I mentioned Biden and Jean-Pierre. Jean-Pierre is Biden's press secretary, current press secretary. And they said something very interesting, okay? And they always bend the language to attack you. Okay, what they said, both of them have said this. If you're going against the multitude of people, if you're going against the greater number of people, then you're an extremist. They've both said that. Well, in fact, what they're pushing is going against the mainstream. The mainstream is still honest. I mean, on the surface. I know there are problems, people always have problems, but on the surface, the mainstream is man-woman relationships, have kids, right? Try to do the right thing and all that. So by their own definition, saying that if you're not in the mainstream, you're an extremist, they've just defined themselves. The thing is, they don't want to see it that way. They want to force their opinion down on you. They want to use minority coercion, which is just as bad as majority coercion in a republic. Neither should exist. It should all be based on rights and those types of things. When I say rights, I don't mean the rights to be able to destroy life and the rights, all the rights that they're trying to substitute for the Bill of Rights, which would guarantee your liberty and your safety and security. They want to change those. They say they're no good. They want to inject all these other phony rights, which are actually corruptions and deceptions and debauchery. And that's really what Bush was saying when he said, if you're not with us, you're with the terrorists. That's really what he was saying back in 2001. Anyway, so that's why I brought up Biden and Jean-Pierre, because by their own definition, they're the extremists, okay? The point is that the majority of people aren't as loud and boisterous about what's right and wrong. By and large, we just want to go about our daily lives and be left alone. But these people do not look at it that way, and you have to understand that. You have to understand that it's not just they want to be accepted, tolerated, they want to force you into their concepts and their actions. And they're going to do it by law. And they've started that already, and you should be able to see it already. Another example of how this thing has crept in, it's not just been in the last few years, all right? It hasn't been in just the last, say, 5-10 years. It hasn't, since Obama, it hasn't been. When I wrote my book, The Crimson Thread, if you haven't read it, you can go on the website and see it. It's not in print anymore, as I've explained before. If anybody's here, I haven't put the link in the description box because that's not really what this is about, but I want to make another point. When I wrote The Crimson Thread, I was actually introduced to some movie people, some producers, who knew that it was so much different than any other story about Jesus out there that they thought that, yeah, let's make a movie about it. Now, these producers and these directors were in Italy, okay? Supposedly the seat of Catholicism, right? They weren't from the Vatican, but they were from Italy. Kind of like the movies that Clint Eastwood made, those spaghetti westerns back in the 60s and 70s. So it's like those types of they make great movies, okay? They do very well, and we've seen a lot of good stuff from them lately too. But my point is that I was approached by them. They asked for my book. I sent it to them. They read it. They said they were going to write a screenplay, and that I would get royalties from it. And it'd be big. It was considered, they figured it was going to be as big a movie as any of Mel Gibson's movies, okay? Because it took it from an historical perspective that nobody had really considered before. But they had one demand that they made of me. Now, this was in 2000 and late 2006, early 2007, all right? The book was published in 2006. Their demand from me was that I had to make Mary Magdalene a cross-dresser transgender. Yes, you heard me right. However you look at Mary Magdalene, whether she was a prostitute, which she was not, she was a noble, or how you look at her relationship with Jesus. I'm not going to get into it there. Go read my book. Go read Dan Brown's book on the Da Vinci Code. I don't really care. A lot of you are not going to accept that. That doesn't matter to me. The point is that they wanted to make one of Jesus's closest associates a transgender, transvestite, Lima, Golf, Bravo. You get the idea. Well, not only is that not historical, but it's wrong. And it's perverting the true story. And it's perverting what the man you know as Jesus, who the man you know as Jesus, would have actually been concerned about. So I didn't do it. I said, no, I'm not going to do that. So the movie contract was canceled. That was in 2006 or 7. This isn't just something that's come about in the last few years, last 5-10 years. This has been a designed, weaponized program to destroy the morals of humanity. And we've got enough problems. People stealing from each other, people lying to each other, people going out and doing crooked business deals. Look at Trump. He did a lot of those. I know you Trumpsters don't like me telling you the truth. Go look at the Trump Tower situation in Vegas and see what he did to the contractors there, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. He's not your savior. But regardless of that, I don't want to get off the point. They're attacking us at our very basic elements. Even Christianity, because it had been invaded by some of these people early on, have been telling you that man-woman relationships are dirty and nasty, and that you can't look at a woman and think that she's beautiful, that's lusting after her. Hey, the definition is that if you lust after a woman, that means a married woman, that you're trying to commit adultery. In your mind, you would be willing to take that woman away from her husband and defile that marriage relationship. It doesn't mean that you can't find women attractive and think, I think I want to marry her. No, there's nothing wrong with that. They've twisted everything. And if you think that the evil powers of this world only influenced secular organizations, governments, etc., and didn't invade even the scriptures that you hold so highly, if you don't think they actually did that, you're really naive and you fooled yourselves. Oh, but God could protect that. God could protect that. Really? Maybe he didn't want to, because maybe he wanted to see what was in your heart. And if you would go along with something only for your fear of him, rather than because of the proper choices you would make inside yourself because of who you are. Again, my bottom line is this has been a program that was set in place, and they've been doing this for thousands of years. It's nothing new. These people follow around the righteous and try to destroy them with degeneracy, with moral corruption, with crimes. And we fall for it and call it tolerance and acceptance. And then what happens? We take part in it. Look at all the families that are going to these, again, I got to be careful here, all of these debased, degenerate shows that they take their kids to. And a child can be protected. When children are when they come up, I can remember this myself. The sexual identity, the sexual part of you're not sure what it is, because, and it's not just a social thing. I remember liking girls when I was 18 months old. My mom was alive, she'd tell you the story about that. But regardless, you still are trying to figure out what and who you are. And your parents are supposed to be there to guide you. Oh, but no, the parents don't have these rights anymore. The state and these organizations and these corrupt medical associations decide that you don't have the rights, parents, that you're trying to teach your kids, you're trying to help them through this process of maturation and this process of individuation. Get them on the right course. Oh, no, you can't do that. If a young kid thinks, oh, I should be, like the other side of the genders. I'm going to use the word gender here. That's not the proper term, but I'll just say that. If they wonder about that, then automatically, without letting them mature through the process and individuate through the growing up phase, which is what this is about, and you force a change on them, you're committing a gross crime. But not in today's society. It's protected. It's encouraged. Look around. Look around. Yes. In my case, back in the 80s, one of the defenses, because I was suing the governments at that point. They didn't charge me with a crime. I was suing them because they fired me. One of the things that they said in their defense was, well, gee, Roy's doing something that's outside the norm. Not really. I just did it in a way they didn't like, because they said if it was just girlfriends, we wouldn't care, right? What they did say, and this was incredible, that first, two things. First, if they let me do that, there'd be no women for anybody else. That was kind of a compliment, actually. I thought that was kind of funny. But more than that, they said that government has I got to get the legal term right, that the government has a trying to remember how it's an interest. The government has a specific interest. I can't remember the legal term right now. Compelling. The government has a compelling state interest to set up moral boundaries. What? No, the government has a requirement to set up laws that protect you in your rights. That's the president's responsibility isn't to keep you safe. The president's responsibility is to keep the Constitution safe and to make sure that your God-given rights under it are protected. I know, legal man. I know. I know the history. I know all the machinations that were going on there. That that's not really the way it was. But that was the idea. That was the principle. But if that argument held true, that it was the responsibility, in my case, it was the responsibility of government, it was a compelling state interest to make sure that morality is promulgated, then what the hell are they doing now? And what changed? Well, nothing really changed. They didn't want me to set the example for dealing with women in a righteous and upfront manner. They wanted to have their whores on the side. They wanted to have their other parties on the side and not have to be held responsible. They wanted to attack. I know you Christians don't like this, but if you don't understand what's happening to you and what you've rejected and what they're replacing it with, they're going to win because you won't have the understanding to stand up against it and to promulgate righteous principles. There are a lot of good people out there that are trying to do the right thing. And I'm not going to say that you need to understand what I did in order to stand up for your family and your wives and your husbands and your children. I'm not saying that. But they've taken us down this path. Once they started to attack it, they went at it like lions and tigers and bears slaughtering the sheep. And here we are. So I wanted to bring all that up with this background, not only to point out where we are and what 9/11 has done to our constitutional republic, which really hasn't been such for really a couple of, almost 2 centuries now, but what they're doing to our spiritual and our physical and our emotional well-being. They're doing this to it, ladies and gentlemen, and it's really to the point now where it's almost irreversible. There has to be a national divorce. We have to leave this. We have to depart from it. And government's going to try to keep you inside. They're going to try to keep you involved so that they can control you. But we have to have competent government authority somewhere that will let us depart from this debauchery, this degeneracy, this corruption. And time is not on our side. It also ties into what's going on in Ukraine. I saw a little, and I know a lot of you are probably divided on this. You think Russians are the bad guys. Well, I'm not going to get involved in that, but we know the Ukrainians are bad. We know what they've been doing, money laundering for your crooked politicians in the EU and in the United States. Right now, the weapons that we're sending there, they don't even keep track of them because the military-industrial complex is making their money. And our military-industrial complex is telling boys to be girls, etc. Right? They're attacking us all across the spectrum. And Ukraine is nothing more than a place to steal your money from you and to go around in a circle and put it back into the pockets of the politicians and the military-industrial complex. That's all it is. Ukraine is the most corrupt government in Europe, possibly the world. And Zelensky is going to speak to some group of defense contractors. I mean, that should tell you everything right there. I have nothing against the Ukrainian people. I'm sure most of them are good, just like most Americans are. But there comes a point where you have to say, you know what? Defending this corrupt regime is not what I should be doing. And I've said that before here too. There's no reason for young Americans or anybody to go serve in this military of the United States in any capacity right now. It's too corrupt. What are you protecting? They don't stand up for the Bill of Rights. As a matter of fact, the SecDef ordered their people to take something that was illegal for him to order. Speaking in generalities now, as you understand. There is no law. They want a world of rules that can be dictated by men, not a world of laws. You know, you hear Biden say, we go by the rule of law. He emphasizes rules because that's what they want, a rule-based society where they can change anything at a whim. And they've done that with our laws anyway, with our Constitution. They've changed the meaning of that. Oh, the Second Amendment doesn't mean that. The First Amendment doesn't mean that. And who stands up to stop it? Nobody. Your great savior, Trump, even betrayed you with the bump stock ban, the red flag laws, not going after protection of the First Amendment. He's done all of that, or I should say, he didn't do anything about it, or he did positive, I should say, negative steps against those things. So who are we supposed to look to? Well, Malachi says it all. And I put this out just again the other day. Malachi, Prophet Joel, and the New Testament in several places. And I have my suspicions of the New Testament, but a lot of the material they got from other places. But regardless of that, and I've said it before, in Malachi it says that the sun, meaning the sun in the sky, will send healing in its wings, and that the evil, the corrupt, will become ashes beneath our feet, and we will walk on them, talking about the righteous. Some information about Elijah in Kings, when Elijah was lamenting that he was all by himself, and God came to him and said, Elijah, I have 7,000 men who have not bowed the knee to Baal. And that's a foretell of today, because that same thing is happening now. It's a remnant. It's not big, but they're there. And actually, 7,000 was the time in that time. It's just a type and shadow of what it would be like today. And today, Malachi and Joel and certain scriptures in the New Testament say that the way this is going to be turned around, you're not going to see somebody come out of the sky. I'm not saying it can't happen, but if you follow the way it's happened before, God writes his law upon your hearts and upon your minds. And your old men shall dream dreams, and your young men shall see visions, and your daughters and your sons will prophesy, and one will send their thousands to flight. I did a little explanation on the expansion of Aleph Tav yesterday to a guy, which is Alpha and Omega in Greek. Most of you should know what that is. But what it is that his children are going to stand up and do this. That's how it's worked in the past, and that's how it's going to work now. When it says that the Spirit of Christ will come back, it will make a rebirth. That's the promise in Malachi, that it'll come back in strength. I'm not saying not to even destroy the wicked, but to come out of them, because that's what you're told to do. Leave Babylon, leave the wicked system. We have to start demanding that our counties and our states do not bow down to this evil federal government, or the EU, or the UN, or the WEF, or the WHO. You get my drift. Let them go off and destroy their kind, because that's what they do. Even history shows that they destroy their kind. Well, they want to destroy you, but they destroy their own kind and then say you did it. Do you understand that in history? Do you know what happened in World War II? Do you know what happened during the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD? Do you really understand that they destroy their own kind and then blame it on you? So to sum it all up today, again, Representative Louis Gohmert, thank you for being there for Dr. Simone Gold, who's a real hero as far as I'm concerned. Both of those people are. And a lot of those who are trying to show the truth of the matter. Those who are trying to show the truth of the matter of what happened back on September 11th, 2001. The real truth, not the bullshit that the government and its lackeys put out in its military-industrial complex and the intelligence communities. I want to thank Biden and his press secretary for saying that if you go against the the largest group of people, if you go against them, then you're the extremist. Because they just defined themselves. And I wanted to point out that this assault on the man-woman-child relationship and good behavior is not new, but it's intensifying. And as Isaiah said, their sin is as Sodom. I'm not going to define what that is. Not here. They take offense to it, where probably take me down again. Their sin is a Sodom. What do? They don't hide it. They don't keep it to themselves. They don't go out. They do go out. They go out and they promulgate it. They insist that you accept it and force it on others. That that's somehow a right. But your right to self-defense, to your own kids, to your freedom of speech, to your right to be secure in your belongings, and the rights that belong to the states and the people that are not enumerated, those don't count anymore. That's what they're about, ladies and gentlemen, and it's going to do this. It already is. You see the results already. I went into the store this morning. I go in just to see what people are doing and how they're acting. And I see a change. There's a desperation in the air. There's a I want mine and I don't care about anybody else attitude. It's permeating all of society. It's no longer the Christian ethic of love your fellow man and to take their considerations first, even before yourself. Now, there are limits to that. A man who doesn't take care of his family, or anybody who doesn't take care of their family, is worse than an infidel, right? According to the scripture. Well, that goes for our people in D.C. too. They're taking care of a corrupt regime in Ukraine while water isn't available in Jackson, Mississippi. They're letting people come across the border when they can't even take care of their own here. They're worse than infidels. Well, I could rant and rave longer, but I think you get my point. And can you imagine that they didn't want to make a movie out of my book, which was really, it was different than Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code, because it was based on actual history of things that you could get out of Josephus and Pliny and some of these others. And what was really happening in the first century, and it was really exciting. As I said, Jesus wasn't just, this wallflower, this petite little guy, fragile little guy who walked around and taught the Beatitudes. He was a strong, powerful man. You can even see it in the Shroud of Turin. He was a warrior. He was a mystic. He understood the Hecalote, how to ascend to the heavens in meditation and contemplation. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you need to study. And he was a man's man, and yes, he was married. If he wasn't, he violated the commandment. He would not have fulfilled the full measure of his mission. He was an Adam, he was a Noah, he was an Abraham. And he's my father. Back a few generations. They wanted me to turn his closest female companion into a transvestite, transgender. Boy, imagine if I had said yes, because that movie would have gone. I mean, it would be unlike any Jesus movie or story you'd ever seen. And back in I think it was the late '80s, the early '90s, they did that one with I forget who the director was, but it was what was the name of it here? The Last Temptation of Christ. It was an awful movie, but it was different, and it stormed the box offices. Well, mine would have been even greater than that, because it would have shown what a true man does. And the great teachings that were brought together at that point in time in defiance of the world. The man you know as Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world." He didn't mean some ethereal place off in space. He didn't even mean in another spiritual realm. What he was talking about was that his kingdom was not of that of the Romans and the Herodians. My kingdom is not of the Roman world. My kingdom is not of the Herodian world, which is really the same thing. They who say they are Jews and are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan. That doesn't mean Jews are the synagogue of Satan. You've misinterpreted it if you think that. It says those who say they are Jews but are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan. So look at that very carefully. And don't accuse Jews, as a matter of course, of being in the synagogue of Satan. That's not what he said. That's not what Revelation said. Okay, I pontificated enough. I wanted you to know how I felt about it. Do this little imagery behind me so that you kind of get the idea. This is where we are, ladies and gentlemen. They're destroying everything. God's people build. God's people are fruitful, multiply, and replenish. They fix, you have a car. Yeah, you could throw it away. But what if you replenish it? What if you fix it up? What if you make it so it works again? That's the higher road, not destruction. Anybody can destroy anything. Building is what's important, and not building a corrupt, degenerate society. Having beautiful architecture, not this stuff that we're putting up now, which is to attack your psychology, your psyche, to give you hopelessness, that you're nothing but just another grain of sand, because you're not. We have children of the fallen angels, Lucifer if you want. Well, Lucifer couldn't have kids. I'm not going to get into that. We have them living amongst us, but we also have God's seed amongst us. And a lot of us are that seed. You just have to find it. You have to be willing to dig down and reject all of this nonsense out in the world and find out what's in your core behind that dark spot in your heart. And God was so great that he even told the fallen angels that if they repented, if you don't believe that, look what he said to Cain, right? If you don't understand the origins of Cain, that's a good example. He said to Cain, if you do well, you'll be accepted. Of course, God knew that he wouldn't, because that's their nature. They don't do well. They're evil. I can't see the chat, so I can't really answer your questions. I apologize, and I better shut this down before my battery goes click, and then this won't upload. But I wanted to put that out today. All they put out in front of us now are degenerate, debased, corrupt leaders, both in churches, politics, government, corporations. We're not going to fix it, ladies and gentlemen. We have to depart from it. We have to leave it. Oh, they'll come after you. Oh, yeah, look what they're doing to those Amish farmers up there who are trying to just grow natural things, and they're trying to shut them down under pretense of law and regulation, shadow of law. So this isn't going to be easy. We're their enemy, and they know it. Now you have to understand that they are your enemy, and you have to treat them that way. Y'all have a great day. We'll see you later.